Let's start. Now we will be starting with Cold War. Now Cold War is a very important period in our geopolitical history that has played a very important contribution in the world as it is today. So firstly understand what Cold War was. Very basically we are going to understand. Then we are going to understand the phases of Cold War. There are mainly three phases. Then we are going to understand how the disintegration of USSR took place, why it took place, and then we would understand what happened after the Cold War. Then post that, we would read about Cold War 2.0. Cold War 2.0 is currently going on, and there are different prescriptions for that. Some say that US Russia are in a Cold War 2.0. Some say that US China are in a Cold War 2.0. So what is this Cold War 2.0? We will understand that as well. But before that, we have to understand what Cold War was. So right now, the definition of Cold War. Cold War refers to this is a very important topic from civil services point of view. Cold War refers to a period of geopolitical tensions. Cold War refers to a period of geopolitical tensions between US and USSR. Geopolitical tensions between US and USSR. The term was coined by Bernard Baruch. The term was coined by Bernard Baruch, not H. Bernard Baruch, B-A-R-U-C-H. The term was coined by Bernard Baruch. Write the next paragraph. It was called as despite of superpower rivalries. It was called despite of superpower rivalries. It was called despite of superpower rivalries. As despite of superpower rivalries, it never escalated into a hot war. It never escalated into a hot war. Despite superpower rivalries, it never escalated into a hot war. Okay? A hot war. Hot war means a physical war. There was a Cold War, which means that it was in the minds. There were other activities happening, but it did not result into a hot pursuit, into a hot war. You know, understand what were the events that led to the Cold War. It's a very significant and a very important topic from UPSC's point of view. The first event is that in 1945, US uses nuclear weapons. US uses nuclear weapons against Japan, and it does not inform Stalin. Does not inform Stalin that it is going to do so, but inform Churchill. Okay, so what had happened is that in 1945, when the US President Harry Truman was going to use the nuclear weapons against Japan, he in a telegram letter informed the UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill that he is planning to use nuclear weapons against Japan. But he did not inform Stalin because he felt that Stalin had to be contained. Stalin was the leader of USSR then. He was the president of USSR, the chairman of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. A very, very, very brutal figure against Stalin. So this led to growing tensions between US and USSR. Now what happens is that Stalin gets a view that US wants to limit USSR. You know, this is how the chickens game plays in geopolitics. Stalin feels that US is trying to limit USSR, and therefore within 4 years, in 1949, USSR develops nuclear weapons. In 1949, USSR develops nuclear weapons. Two largest economies in the world, two largest military in the world, both nuclear weapon states. USSR develops nuclear weapons. This makes United States nervous. This makes United States very nervous. Okay? Now, what is the second episode? So, the second episode is a letter. It is a letter by Mr. X. Letter by Mr. X. Now, who is Mr. X? Mr. X is US ambassador to USSR. His name is George Kennan. George Kennan. George Kennan. He is US ambassador to USSR. He writes a letter to Truman. He writes a letter an anonymous letter to Truman, Mr. X, that the entire government, understand this first, that the entire government in USSR is actually planning to contain the United States. Their main objective is not to cooperate with the US on issues, but they are planning to expand communism across the world and therefore limit the US's sphere of influence. This letter, when received by Truman, makes Truman and Roosevelt very nervous because they feel that USSR would make any attempt to expand communism and limit the influence of United States. What do they do? This leads to the third step. This Harry Truman launches Truman Doctrine. Harry Truman launches Truman Doctrine. Truman Doctrine, D-R-U-M-A-N, Doctrine in 1946. See, this is all happening within a scale of 1 year. What is Truman Doctrine? So, write down the Truman Doctrine espoused the expansion of democracy across the world. Truman Doctrine espoused expansion of democracy across the world and expansion of democracy across the world and containing the subversion of governments by Soviet Union. Truman Doctrine espoused the expansion of democracies around the world and containing the subversion of governments by communism. Containing the subversion of governments by communism. See, now understand, this is US's coming. What happened in this time? So, there was in 1850s to 80s, don't write this, just understand. The age before 1945 was called as Pax Britannica. Pax Britannica. Why? Because Britain was the sole superpower in the world. The world was multipolar, but Britain was the second most power, especially because of its colonies. In this time, that is from the period of 1850s to 1860s, in the period of 1850s to 1940s, in this time, US, the United States, followed what is called as the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine. M-U-N-R-O-E. Monroe Doctrine. Just understand this. No need to write. Monroe Doctrine essentially espoused that US will remain an isolationist power. US will not go out to the world and try to expand democracies, topple governments, expand its sphere of influence. Because US is contained in a very good geography between the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, it would remain restricted and isolated to its own geography and not go out to the entire world. So in this period from 1850s to 1940s, under the Monroe Doctrine, US only followed expanding its sphere of influence to the region of North and South Americas. That's it. So from Canada to the bottom Argentina, all the countries followed US's takeouts. But US did not interfere into European politics. It did not go out colonizing other countries. It did not come to Asia because it followed the Monroe Doctrine. The end of Monroe Doctrine takes place. The end of Monroe Doctrine takes place with the Truman Doctrine. Why? Because after 1946, Harry Truman says that now we are a superpower. We are a nuclear weapon state. We are the largest economy in the world. We can go out in the world and expand our sphere of influence. Also because we want to contain communism that is being spread by Soviet Union. So Truman says that we could go across the world and establish democracies. We could go across the world and prevent the subversion of governments by the communist ideology. Therefore, the opposite of Monroe Doctrine came in the form of Truman Doctrine. Truman Doctrine, in a way, ended the Monroe Doctrine. The isolationist tendency of US became extremely global in nature. And now Donald Trump's Trumpism, the third doctrine is coming in the United States now, known as Trumpism. It is again becoming isolationist under Trump. So in a way, Donald Trump is, in this era, overturning the Truman Doctrine. He is saying that America for American first. We do not want to fight a war in Afghanistan. We do not want to fight a war in Ukraine. We do not want to fight a war in the Pacific. We want to make America good again, and we have superior geography. No country can attack us. Why do we have to fight others' wars? Let's make within our own country. So it's like going back to the Monroe Doctrine. So this is US's coming back of isolationism. Now, after Truman Doctrine came in 1947, what is called as Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan. MARSHALL Plan. 1947. Marshall Plan. So first, US used the nuclear weapons. Then it receives a letter by Mr. George Kennan. Then comes the Truman Doctrine, overturning the Monroe Doctrine. Then in 1947 comes the Marshall Plan. MARSHALL. Marshall Plan. What is Marshall Plan? Marshall Plan right now aimed to promote. Marshall Plan aimed to promote the economic development of Europe. The economic development of Europe by extending aid and credit facilities. Extending aid and credit facilities. It also aimed to dilute Soviet's influence in Europe. It also aimed to dilute Soviet's influence in Europe. Soviet's influence in Europe. Soviet's influence in Europe. Okay? Now what happens is that USSR comes up with the counter to the Marshall Plan. USSR comes up with Molotov Plan. MOLOTOV. MOLOTOV. Molotov Plan. Molotov Plan. Okay? This was counter of Soviet Union to Marshall Plan. It started giving aid right now. Started giving aid to East European countries for economic development. Started giving aid to East European countries. For economic development. Okay. Then the next episode is formation of NATO. Formation of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in 1949. Okay. formation of NATO in 1949. Now we know about NATO already, that NATO was a treaty-based alliance. Right now, NATO is a treaty-based alliance formed between US and Western European countries. Formed between US and Western European countries, aiming to promote collective defense. Collective defense. We have discussed what collective defense is yesterday. Collective defense. Aiming to promote collective defense. Okay. So NATO was formed in 1949. Initially there were Western European countries. After 1990s, there were Eastern European countries also getting integrated. So Poland was integrated, Hungary was integrated, Latvia, Lithuania, recently Finland and Sweden also got integrated. So not just Eastern European countries, Western European countries, now even Eastern European countries are getting integrated in NATO. Now next point. As a response to NATO in 1955, Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact. WARSAW, Warsaw Pact. PAC, Warsaw Pact. WARSAW, Warsaw Pact. Okay. When the Warsaw Pact was established, essentially the bipolarity got established because there were two clear alliance systems, one NATO, other Warsaw, that contested against each other. Now the next major event of Cold War is the Korean War. Of 1950. The Korean War of 1950. I'm not getting into the details because of paucity of time, but essentially you can understand right now first Korean War 1950. See this region. This is China. This is Russia. So see, there's a border. If you see, this is North Korea, led by Kim Jong-un. This is South Korea. Okay. This is the border between the North Korea and the South Korea. And North Korea borders China, and here there is a small border with Russia also. So it borders both China and Russia. What had happened is that after the Second World War, during the Second World War, Japan had captured Korea. Okay, very quickly I'm explaining. Japan had captured Korea. Now during the Second World War, Japan lost the allies. So the US and the other powers were in an attempt to capture the entire Korean region. Okay, US and other powers wanted to make the entire Korean region a democracy. But this was very close to China. China was a communist country. This was also war in Russia, which was a communist country, USSR. So they felt that if this came under USS's sphere of influence, it would act as a thorn in the back of China and Russia. So instead, what they did that from the top, China and Russia sent their forces along with the communist guerrillas of North Korea to fight the USS and South Korean forces. So there was a stalemate. They kept on fighting. And there was a lot of negotiation going on. Even Jawaharlal Nehru played a very crucial role. He went to Korea and tried to bring peace between the two. But peace could not get established, and instead a buffer zone was established between North Korea and South Korea. And this buffer zone separated the two regions. And as a result, North Korea was led by a dictator. He was the father of Kim Jong-un. I think his name was Kim Jong-sun. Now his son is Kim Jong-un. And South Korea became a democracy, one of the most prosperous countries in the world. Later now, North Korea has developed nuclear weapons. Now even North Korea has developed nuclear weapons and it does nuclear saga battling with the United States. And if you see, what has happened is that Donald Trump became the first president to go and meet Kim Jong-un. He met Kim Jong-un on the borders and then he met on the side of North Korea to meet Kim Jong-un along with him. He became the first president to land on North Korea. So this was the Korean War. Very briefly I'll explain. There is another episode that happens during this time, which is called as Berlin blockade. Berlin blockade. Number 8, Berlin blockade. Now understand this carefully. This took place in 1948. Berlin blockade, 1948. Again, I have to show you a map. So this is Berlin. Now what had happened is that assume this is Germany. What had happened is that Germany, you know what had happened in Second World War. The German forces entered into Russia. Russia pushed them out, came to Berlin. Okay. Meanwhile, the French and the British forces also went into Germany and reached Berlin. So what had happened is that half of the Germany was in Soviet Union's control and half of the Germany was in British and French control. So if you see this map, I don't know if it is visible or not, they divided the entire region of Germany into 3-4 parts. See, this is written Soviet zone. This is written British zone. I am just telling you the region if it is not visible. This region is British zone, this region is Soviet zone, this region is American zone. Because after the Second World War, Germany had got distributed. So they divided Germany among themselves. This was called French zone. And what had happened is that when the Cold War kicked in, Soviet Union used its air power to create a blockade. See, this blockade was created. And Berlin was under the control of British zone. Okay? Berlin was under the control of British zone, but all the territories around Berlin were under the control of Soviet zone. Okay? So what it did was that Soviet Union created a blockade and prevented supplies of food and relief materials coming from Western Germany into Eastern Germany. And Berlin was located in Eastern Germany. So this actually led to the creation of what is called as the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was therefore created, and the response was that the Soviet Union felt that if Berlin was blockaded, then the lack of supplies would automatically lead the American and the British forces to exit Berlin. But that did not happen. What US did, that US started doing air supplies to Berlin. Therefore, the Berlin blockade of Soviet Union failed. And instead of that, the Soviet Union built the Berlin Wall. So the essential basic concept is that Germany was divided between West Germany and East Germany. The West Germany came under the control of the British, American, and the French zone. They installed a democratic regime in West Germany. The East Germany came under the Soviet zone. They made East Germany the part of Warsaw Pact. In order to capture control over Berlin, which was part of East Germany, but under the control of US and British, they blockaded it in between. And the British and the US authorities undertook airlift of supplies and relief materials to Berlin to prevent famine and prevent food shortages. So the Berlin blockade failed, but the East Germany established a Berlin Wall in between. So the Berlin Wall got established.